Hello, everybody, and first of all, thank you for giving us this great opportunity to introduce ourselves here, but more importantly, to talk about our projects. And I'm working here in Maastricht in the group of Eric, in the experimental vascular pathology group, and I'm focusing on the topic reconstructing the atherosclerotic plaque macrophages. And the first time I was working on macrophages was in Marseille during my master's thesis. And at that time, I also already tried to explain it to my parents what macrophages actually are. And parents, they probably always try to link it to the past to get, to remember it. And after telling them that macrophages mainly phagocytose, so eat cells and everything, my mother just told me, you are a macrophages because apparently I ate a lot, so I phagocytosed a lot food in the early years. And luckily, I haven't told them that I'm working on atherosclerosis because when you look at this map, so the road to heart disease, I actually already completed the first steps, being a bit overweight. And probably she would now worry a lot about my health, but you see, I'm still fine. And it looks a bit like a board game, but I think no one of us really wants to reach the finish, so to get a heart disease. But when you look in the world, there are people who are reaching this finish, who are getting a heart disease, and that already in early years. So it's a really common problem to get a heart disease. And one underlying cause of this is atherosclerosis. You have many risk factors. You have factors that you can't influence, like your gender, your age. So still until now you can't stop aging. You have sometimes you have genetic defects that causes diseases which also support atherosclerosis. But there's also your lifestyle. So if you smoke, better stop smoking, or the best thing is never start smoking. The being active, doing sport, or being just lazy, eating unhealthy food with a high level of cholesterol and fat, or being a very stressed person, having high blood pressure and hypertension. And knowing these risk factors also means that you often know how to prevent this. So stop smoking or never start smoking, doing exercise. If you are obese or have overweight, maybe you should lose some weight, have a healthy diet, and maybe drink not that much. But for me as a German, I think it's fine drinking 1 or 2 beers. And nevertheless, developing atherosclerosis and developing atherosclerosis can have strong clinical implications like a stroke or a heart attack. And during this progress of developing atherosclerosis, macrophages are playing a pivotal role in these. So imagine you have a neighbor, 15 years old, so still young. He has monocytes floating around in the circulation, and these monocytes are immigrating into the tissue and developing into macrophages. They are going to sites of inflammation or just to replenish other macrophages that died in the intestine or in the skin, for example. And then eating a lot of fatty food leads to a high level of cholesterol, a high level of low-density lipoproteins. And maybe after 5 years, after 10 years, so in his 20s, he starts smoking or have a lot of stress, and he has hypertension, then he has damaged endothelium. And this damaged endothelium favors the accumulation of LDLs in the intima, and the producing of reactive oxygen species then leads to a modification of these lipids. So you have an accumulation of normal lipids and oxidized lipids, and due to the damage of the endothelium, these cells are producing pro-inflammatory cytokines. And these cytokines are attracting and recruiting monocytes. So the monocytes are immigrating into the tissue. They're developing and differentiating into macrophages, and they start eating the lipids. But at this point, your neighbor is still fine. Maybe he's probably still lazy, he probably eats unhealthy food, but he's fine. Then these macrophages that eat a lot of lipids they becoming foam cells. And these foam cells expressing different factors, growth factors, and also pro-inflammatory cytokines that again are recruiting and attracting new monocytes. So you have a vicious circle of immigration of monocytes into the tissue, developing into macrophages, eating lipids, then getting activated by these lipids, expressing again new pro-inflammatory cytokines, and then attracting new monocytes. So it's a kind of vicious circle. And this vicious circle leads to an accumulation of the foam cells and to a formation of a fatty streak. And although there's a fatty streak, your neighbor is still fine. The expression of growth factors and of cytokines also leads to a migration of the smooth muscle cells into the intima. And here they are secreting collagen and later on also leading to calcification. And these collagen that is formed around the foam cells, around the fatty streak, is stabilizing this plaque. But eating many lipids, have a high content of lipids, leads to the death of macrophages of the foam cells, to the apoptosis. And at one point, there's an imbalance between the apoptosis of macrophages and the capability of macrophages to phagocytose these dead cells. So you have a necrotic core that is growing, that is still growing, and at some point, due to the necrotic core, due to the expression of enzymes like the collagenase or like the matrix metalloproteinases, these collagen is degraded, and this could lead to a formation of a thrombus. So in the worst case, the formation of a thrombus then leads to the blocking of the arteriole, and then could lead to a stroke or heart attack. And at this point, it becomes very dangerous for your neighbor. And you see in all of these different phases of the development and progression of atherosclerosis, macrophages are playing a very, very important role. And during my master thesis, my supervisor once used this quote, this remarkable quote actually, because there's at the bottom only one genuinely scientific treatment for all diseases, and that is to stimulate the phagocytes. So it was made in 1906. And although in the last years and the last decades we really gained a lot of knowledge about diseases and also about phagocytes, it somehow still holds true. We just have to modify it a bit, because there's at bottom only one genuinely scientific treatment for all diseases, and that is to modulate the phagocytes. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to modulate, we want to reprogram, we want to re-instruct the macrophages to have a more anti-inflammatory, more atherosclerotic, or more plaque-resolving phenotype. And this would ideally, so with a kind of daydream, leading to a complete regression of the plaque, or at least to a stabilization of the plaque. And how are we going to do this? So in my first project, we want to identify targets for this reinstruction. So we have microarray data of patients for the stable and unstable plaque, in addition to stainings of these stable and unstable plaques for different macrophage markers. And by using bioinformatic analysis, we want to correlate this expression of the genes to the staining, so that we can see which genes are upregulated and downregulated in the different macrophage subsets. And by using an advanced clustering method, we want to cluster these genes into packages. And these packages that are upregulated, we want to check if there's an enrichment of specific genes, of specific pathways, and also if there are genes which are quite important for macrophages and atherosclerosis. And of these interesting genes, we want to create siRNA. We want to design siRNA that we transfect to the macrophages, and then we would like to do a functional high content analysis. So we are looking which effect does the silencing of the gene have on different functions of the macrophages, which are important in the atherosclerosis, like the inflammational state. As I said, the atheroscytosis of these, or the capacity of atheroscytosis of these macrophages, the uptake of lipids, which is very important, but also they're resistant to apoptosis, to ROS, or additional stress. And for analyzing these different functions, we can assess if these genes are important for these macrophages in atherosclerosis, and if it would be beneficial to look at these genes, to re-instruct them or not. And in a second project, we would like to characterize the macrophages of the human plaque. So we're getting plaques directly from the surgery. We isolate the macrophages. And these macrophages we sort for more or less different subsets. So to look at more pro-inflammatory macrophage population, for macrophage population which is more the foam cell, which are more the foam cells. And then we want to isolate the RNA, want to do an RNA sequencing, and then want to analyze these subsets. So in terms of creating a transcriptional profile of these different subsets to see if some genes are upregulated or if they have a specific profile also between the different inflammatory macrophages. And in addition to these transcriptional analysis, we would also like to do the functional analysis again to link the transcriptional profile to the functional profile of the macrophages, but also to see if which impact the different subsets have on the progression of atherosclerosis. And yeah, to close my talk, I would really like to thank my group, the experimental vascular pathology, and especially Eric, Peter, and Mario for their supervision, Han for the bioinformatics, and Lieve, Matt, and Margot for all the help with the high content analysis. In addition, I would really like to thank the Evolution program for giving us this opportunity here, for doing research on such a high level, and of course Annabelle and John Paul for helping us very much with these presentations. Thank you.